Good morning. Welcome to the end of our second week. We have made it through the first 2 weeks of our Term 2B material. If you're just joining in, you have not missed anything. I'm running behind today. I apologize, team. But welcome to the MEL3E, our grade 11 Math for Everyday Life course. My name is Kobe Flatt, and every Monday to Thursday we go through the MEL3E curriculum together. These radio Zoom classes are a chance to go through all the material, work through each individual lesson, do some extra examples, really get a grasp on the course concepts, and then we are hopefully set up for success for completing the key questions. If you still need more help, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can contact me through email, phone, or Facebook. We are going to finish off lesson 4 today. This is our third day of getting through all of the lesson 4 material, not because the lesson 4 in the independent learning course is that much greater than any of the others, but because this is Math for Everyday Life, I want to make sure that you are getting a firm understanding of how taxes work, especially because it lines up beautifully with tax season right now. That's why I've gone into greater depth to give more background on information that will hopefully be helpful for you in your day-to-day business. That having been said, to wrap up lesson 4, I wanted to run through what we have spoken about so far. We looked at income taxes. We broke into provincial taxes, federal taxes, who pays taxes. We talked about what taxes are for, why they're mandatory, why the government takes it. We learned that it's to generate income to support the government and the programs and services that they provide, which kind of feels like it comes full circle. We see and reap the benefits in other ways. Some of the services and programs that our taxes go towards are roads and highways, education, national defense, libraries, hospitals, parks, police and fire services. There are so many that also come about in the form of old age security pension, Canada Child Benefits, social assistance. So although it seems like there's a lot that comes off our paycheck, we can feel like we're going to get it again at the other end. Our first day of lesson 4, we talked about the tax brackets. We wanted to say that we know how to calculate tax brackets, that we now have a better understanding of the tax brackets are applied to certain chunks of our money, as opposed to the common misconception that you find your tax bracket and you pay that rate of all of it. That's not right, and we now know that. So we worked through how to divvy up, so to speak, our income on the different brackets. You can see now, if you're following along with my slides, I have adjusted those new maximums. We were working off of the old 2024 to show you how you can use old material, but now I have put in the new numbers so you can see that as well. If you need to go back and watch recordings, you can. We saw there's a difference between the federal taxes and the provincial taxes. Then we looked at tax forms. Tax forms we talked about yesterday, what they're for, where you find them, how to complete them. We really wanted to get into this information as it's tax season. If you wanted to try your hand at completing your own and filing your own taxes, or using one of the services that we discussed and how to find that. We looked at how to read our T4s and T5s, and we practiced finding the information such as CPP, EI, premiums, and charitable donations on our T4s and T5s. Today we're going to continue with the last bit of lesson 4, where we're going to talk about hidden taxes. Now, hidden taxes, we get into some percentage, and although we touched on that last week, I wanted to go back and highlight how to find percentages to start today's lesson. We know that percentage in mathematics is a number or a ratio which can be represented as a fraction of 100. Remember, the term percent originates from a Latin word percentum, which means per 100. That is, we're dividing by 100. Now, the symbol, and it's usually that little circle with the backslash with a circle underneath, that is the symbol for percentage, and we can use that to mean of the per 100. We do come across percentages in our daily lives. You might see them on discounts, you might see them on interest charged on loans, perhaps to evaluate your performance as a student. When you submit your lessons, I will give you a grade as a percentage, letting you know how well you did. Percentages can also be how value changes over time. When you look at your car, your property, we see percentages in our day-to-day lives. How do you calculate percentage? Part of your key question is going to be needing to calculate taxes as a percentage. There are two possibilities of finding the percentage of a number. The first is to find a percentage of a number when it is in decimal form. You just need to multiply the decimal by 100. So if we have 0.5, we can convert it to a percentage by multiplying it by 100. Remember way back one of our first lessons, we talked about when you're going from small to big, you multiply. If it's big and you need it to go small, you divide. Because we've got a decimal, it's a fraction of, it's a piece of, and we want to make it a big percentage, we have to multiply. The second case involves an actual fraction. If the number is in fraction form, first you have to convert the fraction to a decimal, and then you get to multiply it by 100. So if the percent is 1/6, first you have to divide to get a decimal. So 1/6, 1/6 is saying 1 divided by 6. When you calculate 1 divided by 6, you get 0.16666, and it keeps going. Now we've got a form that we recognize. It's in a decimal. It's really small, so we need to multiply by 100 to get it into a percentage. This is what a lot of your schoolwork will look like. For instance, here in lesson 4, it says that the entire lesson is worth 30 marks. You might get 26 out of 30. That is a fraction. It's in fractional form. 26 out of 30. What happens is you calculate 26 divided by 30 to get 0.86666, and it goes on. Now, rather than telling you, congratulations, you got 0.86666, nobody recognizes that. We want to put it as a percentage. So how well did you do if you got 26 marks out of 30? We take that 0.66666 and we multiply by 100. When we multiply it by 100, we then get 86.666%, not something that you're going to see on your returned work. So instead, it would round up to the nearest whole number. We would say, congratulations, you received 87%. So you can see how this applies to your day-to-day lives, that sometimes it's already given as a decimal, sometimes it's given as a fraction first, you turn it into a decimal, and then you get your percent. So this is what you would see on your returned work. You would see maybe 26 out of 30 equals 87%. And this is what we're doing. These are the steps that I go through when I grade your work. We want to practice what percentage of income is taxed. This is going to help us better complete our key question when it comes to calculating the hidden tax. I'm going to, because of the sake of time, I'm going to go over to hidden tax, and then we'll come back to this and I'll show you how to calculate a percentage. But now you have a better idea of what percentage is and how we calculate it, so that we can know how to complete that question in our key question. So here we are. If you are in your IL booklet and you're following along, you can turn to page 35 of your Unit 1 material. Hidden taxes are those taxes that we don't always see. People pay both direct tax and indirect tax. The direct taxes are taxes like your property tax, your HST, income tax. These are things that we know, we see, we account for. There are also indirect taxes, and these are the taxes that are included in the selling price of the item. They're sometimes known as hidden taxes because you don't see them up front. They're included already in the selling price. For instance, you will see on page 35 that there are 3 examples of common hidden taxes. Hidden taxes are often found as jewelry tax, cigarette tax, and gasoline tax. When we think of jewelry tax, we know that jewelry tax has a certain percentage associated with it. 10% of the wholesale price, so that is the price that the store pays, is included as jewelry tax in the store's asking price. If I go to the store and I want to buy a watch, the store has already calculated this hidden tax. They've already included the 10% of the wholesale price and then sell it to me as part of the asking price. So jewelry has hidden tax, cigarettes, and gasoline. Let's practice how it would be calculated. My first example question says, what is the amount of indirect tax that will be added to the sale price of a brooch? If the brooch has a wholesale price of $57, what is the amount of indirect tax that will be added? Well, we first want to find out what that amount is. Because we're talking jewelry, a brooch is like one of those fancy pins that you see on people's shirt. It's fancy, often on their coat, usually sparkly, doesn't have to be. But a brooch is something that you wear like a pin. It is a piece of jewelry. We know that jewelry has 10% hidden tax. So we want to know 10%, what does it work out to be as a decimal? We want to put it into decimal form. Remember, when we are small going big, we have to multiply, but when it's already big and we want to go small, we need to divide. Because percent means per 100, we do 10 divided by 100. You can type it into your calculator, or you can remember that 10 as a whole number is 10 decimal 0. There are 2 zeros, so we move the decimal place 1, 2 times, making our decimal 0.10. So 10% is written as 0.10. Now that we have it as a decimal, we can multiply it by the sale price. So if the brooch is $57, we are going to either do 10% of, if you have that percent button on your calculator, or you can do 0.10 times $57, or you can just do decimal 10 times $57. If you can see my screen, I'm typing into Desmos Scientific Calculator 3 different ways of writing the same thing. We always get the same answer, so it doesn't really matter how you write it. If you do 10% of, if you do 0.10, or if you just do decimal 0. Remember that 0 is just a placeholder, so you can just do decimal 10 and you get the same answer. So 10% of $57 is $5.70. There's another way you can do mental math. Again, because it's 10, there's 1 0 in 10. We move the decimal place 1 spot. That gives us 5.70. Lots of ways to calculate it. Whatever way you are going to calculate it is how I ask that you please represent it. Write it down in your workbook the way that you're calculating, just in case there are any discrepancies. Then I might be able to see why. Maybe the decimal didn't catch on your calculator. So showing your work is huge. It's key. This is a word problem, so we need to have a therefore statement. What is the amount of indirect tax that will be added to the sale price of a brooch with the wholesale price of $57? We can do our 3 little dots that make a triangle that stands for therefore. Therefore, the indirect tax is $5.70. So remember, this is how much the store pays. It's that indirect tax, that hidden tax. If you want any extra help with this, if maybe you want to try a few more just so you feel confident and comfortable with it, you can try your hand at the support questions and either pause it here, work on it if you're watching the recording. Otherwise, the rest of us, we're going to move on and we're going to look at cigarette tax, which is still on page 35. Here in Ontario, there are 3 cigarette taxes included in the selling price of cigarettes. This is in addition to the HST that is taxed on top of the selling price. Jewelry tax, there's that 10% tax that's hidden and included in the selling price. For cigarette tax, there are 3 hidden taxes, indirect taxes, included in the selling price, and then you get HST on top of that. Now, as of March 29th, 2018, the current tax rates are 18.475 cents per cigarette. That's 18.475 cents per gram or part gram of tobacco product other than cigarettes and cigars. and then 56.6% of the taxable price of a cigar. This one is a little bit tricky for some people. It's a large part of the key question, and it doesn't seem like much because you almost overlook it. It's like one paragraph and 2 lines, not even. It looks like a paragraph in total on page 35. But it's important, and you need to note these numbers so that you can successfully complete the key question. So we're going to walk through this part carefully. On page 35, under cigarette tax, it says, in Ontario, the tax rate for cigarettes and other tobacco products, except cigars, is 18.475 cents per cigarette and per gram or part gram of other tobacco products. Again, this is in addition to the HST that are taxed on top of the selling price. That means on a carton of 200 cigarettes with a selling price of $120, the provincial government collects $36.95. If the carton of 200 cigarettes had a selling price of $40.70, we can break it down to say that the provincial government collects $8.90. The federal government then collects $6.85. And then the federal government also gets, with the HST, another $5.50. When you look at the price of one carton, if that one carton cost $40.70, $8.90 is going to the province of Ontario, $6.85 is going to the federal government, then the federal government gets another $5.50. Without all the taxes, your carton of cigarettes could just be $19.45. When you think about how much is in that, you can break it down to know how much is being taken. And it's important to think of how much is being taken because one of your key questions is going to say, why is that much taken? When you are asked a question like this, what do you think? So let's be specific here. Let's turn to page 41 of your IL booklet. Question 10 says, why do you think the government charges high taxes on cigarettes and gasoline? This question is asking your opinion. You can't really get it wrong, but you can lose marks if you're not providing supporting evidence. So you can tell me essentially whatever you think as long as you've given me 2 reasonable logistic answers that have 2 pieces of evidence, 2 details, so that you get the full 2 marks. Let's go back and think about income tax and how we get these deductions off of our paycheck. And they're taking it off for CPP, for EI, for health benefits, just as an example. Remember why. Why are those deducted? And I've said multiple times, it comes full circle. It's so that we get it in other ways later. You want to use that critical thinking to help you answer the questions that ask your opinion. Use what you know. Well, Kobe said in lesson 4 that they take money off for EI for the days that I can't work, for the times when maybe I'm sick or injured or I go on mat leave. It all comes back to me in another way. You want to use your knowledge to apply it. Why do you think the government charges such high taxes on both cigarettes and gasoline? Give me your complete answer with 2 pieces of supporting evidence. Let's do an example. Let's look at calculating cigarette tax. The example I have on the board says a pack of cigarettes costs $15 and it includes 25 cigarettes. So we're not talking a carton of 200, we're talking one pack. A pack of 25 cigarettes costs $15. How much is the cigarette tax? Well, we know for every cigarette there is tax of 18.475 cents. We want to multiply that by how many cigarettes there are. This specific case says that we have 25 cigarettes. So we are going to multiply 18.475 cents by 25 cigarettes because we want to know for each one. We end up getting, if we do, I'm going to erase all of this on my decimals calculator. Let's clear it so we start fresh. 18.475 times 25. We get 461.875. Now remember, this is cents, not dollars, because we did 18.475 cents. So that means it is 461.875 cents. We know that pennies are 1 cent out of 100. You can think of it as money. A loonie is a whole dollar. It's 100 cents. Because it's 100 cents, we would divide by 100, which means we move the decimal place 2 times, which means we could put this into terms of, therefore, how much is the cigarette tax? The tax is $4.60, and because cents is always rounded to 2 decimal places, the 8 bumps the 1 up to a 2, so we would say $4.62. So this is the hidden tax. This is what is included in the sale price. So we don't have to plan to have an extra $4.62 on us. It's already included in the $15. The next part of this question says how much is HST on the pack? This is the direct tax. This is what we see and what goes on top of the selling price. So the $4.62, that's indirect tax. It's hidden in the sale price. The HST now is what we do have to account for, budget for, know that we're going to have to pay extra on. In Ontario, HST is 13%. If you are working through your IL booklet and it asks for HST and it does not specify, if it does not specifically say you are in Alberta, you are in Quebec, you are in, if it doesn't specifically say, then always assume we're here, we're home, we're in Ontario. So then you apply the 13%. When we apply to calculate, we need to change that 13% into a decimal. When we need to turn it into a decimal, we divide it by 100 and we get 0.13. Now we can apply that tax, the HST 0.13, times how much is the pack of cigarettes. What is the selling price? It tells us here the pack costs $15. So this indirect tax, the $4.62, it's already in there. So we have $15. Now we want to know what is the HST on $15. So we say 0.13 times $15. Oops. There we go. We get $1.95. So the pack costs $15 and the HST is an extra $1.95. If it asked us the total price, then we could add the $1.95 to the 15, which we are going to need to do for the next part of the question. But because this one just says how much is HST, just include what the HST is. Be sure to read the question carefully so you're giving the right answer. If it said how much is the pack in total with HST, then you could tell me it's $16.95. But it wants to know just the HST. So we just write the $1.95. The next part of the question, part C, says what percentage of the total price is taxes? This is where we need to put all of our learning together. What we know about percentages, what we know about converting from percentage to decimal and decimal to percentage. So let's walk through this one step by step because you're going to want to know this one. It'll come up in your key question. Let's break down the question so we answer it completely. What percentage of the total price is taxes? So first thing we're going to need to do is find total price. The total price is the sale price of $15, which includes the indirect taxes. Then we need to add the HST, that's additional, that's the direct tax. So $15 plus $1.95 equals $16.95. We then need to figure out the total amount of taxes. So we have the total sale price. Now we need the total amount of taxes. We calculated indirect tax is $4.62 and the HST is $1.95. So we have our indirect, which is the hidden, and we have our direct, which we can calculate for budgeting with HST. We want to calculate what is $1.95 plus $4.62. The total amount of taxes is going to be $6.57. Now, does the question say what is the total amount of taxes? No. It asks us to find the percentage of the total price. We need to find percentage. Remember, percent is when we need the bigger number. So we need to move from a decimal to a bigger number. In order to do so, we want to take the amount of taxes and divide it by the total price. So we want amount of taxes divided by the total overall price. We just calculated the amount of taxes is $6.57, and previously we calculated the total price being $16.95. So we need to calculate what is $6.57 divided by $16.95. We get a decimal, 0.3876, etc., etc., etc. You can see our big long number. You don't have to write it all out. Because we're just looking for a percent, we don't need all of the numbers. Are we finished? Not quite yet. We still need that big percentage. We need to know what percentage. So we have to convert this back to a percentage. We have something small, we need it to be large, so we are going to multiply by 100. When we multiply, we're moving it 2 decimal places, or you can take your answer and multiply by 100. You see that you get 38.7610 blah 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 blah. It's up to you how you want to write it. You can just say to the nearest whole number. So we could round this up to 39%, because 38.7, the 7 is big enough to bump the 8 up to a 9. You can also write it as 38.8%. That's okay, you can include that decimal if you want. So it's up to you how you want to write it, but the whole question is asking for the percentage, so you need to have it written as a percentage. So did we answer everything? We found how much the cigarette tax is. We found how much the HST tax is. We found the total price. We found the total amount of taxes. And then we were able to calculate percentage by dividing the amount of taxes divided by the total price. It gave us a decimal, so we knew we weren't quite done because it asks for percentage. So we then had to multiply by 100. It's a lot of steps, but if you keep yourself organized, you can say total price, total amount, this is how I do it. You will be able to complete your key question. Let's see if I have another. If you want more practice, you can always do the support question. The support question is on pages, it sort of flips over because we have the jewelry tax, the cigarette tax, and then the gasoline tax. So it flips over to pages 35 and 36. We're almost at the end of class. I want to get our last one in, which is gasoline tax. And gasoline tax is on page 36. Much like our other taxes, gasoline taxes are collected by both federal and provincial governments. HST is not added to the selling price of gasoline. It is already included. So this is what it looks like as opposed to the jewelry and the cigarette. HST is not added to gas because it's already included. In 2022, the government taxes for gasoline were 10 cents per liter collected by the federal government, 14.7 cents per liter collected by the provincial government. We want to know what is, we're going to do an example question here so that we can figure out how to calculate. The question says, what is the total of the 2 gasoline taxes on 35 liters of gas? Well, we know that if we look back here, the federal is 10 cents per liter and provincial is 14.7. So we are going to calculate first the federal. We'll say federal is 10 cents per liter and provincial is 14.7 cents per liter. To calculate the federal, we do 10 cents per liter times 35 liters. So 10, let's clear all of this, clear that. So we can calculate 10 cents per liter times 35 liters gets us 350 cents. Remember, it's in cents. If we want to convert it, it's 350 cents of 100, so we would get $3.50. Now the provincial, we can also change it right now. we can say, rather than changing it at the end, we can change it first. We can say 14.7 divided by 100, and we get 0.147. If we convert it first, then we don't have to convert it after. 0.147 times 35 equals $5.15. So depending on when you want to do your step, you can either calculate it after. Just remember your unit of measurement so that you don't get confused and say it's $350 in taxes. That would be crazy. What is the total of the two gases? We are just going to add them up. We're going to add $3.50 plus the $5.15, giving us a total $8.65. Therefore, the total of the two taxes is $8.65. And that's it. If you want to practice, you can go ahead to the support question, try the one that deals with gasoline taxes, making sure you're paying attention to when you do your conversion. And that wraps up our lesson 4. We talked about paying taxes, we talked about the tax paperwork, we talked about the different forms. We have the TD1 general form, the Schedule 1 form, the ON 428 form. We know that T4 is our statement of remuneration, which tells us the amount of income. The T5, it tells us the interest that we've accumulated. So the T4 comes from your employer. The T5 comes from your bank or financial institution. Receipts are going to be obtained from your service provider. So if you've got receipts for daycare, you go to your daycare. If you want receipts for your money that you put in the church offering plate, you get it from the church. Lastly, we wrapped it up with hidden taxes. We know that jewelry taxes are 10% of the wholesale price. Cigarette taxes are 18.475 cents per cigarette. And we know that gasoline tax, federal government collects 10 cents per liter and the provincial government collects 14.7 cents per liter. We don't broadcast tomorrow, so use tomorrow to work on any of your outstanding assignments. Please reach out if you have any questions. I will be in the office all day. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We will see you back next week. We will start off with Lesson 5. All the best.